Okay, this is the second part of our week 3 project, and this is to use these single drum hits to create some simple manually created drum beats. So this was the original recording project that I used when I started to make the drum pattern project, and now I'm going to use the first part that I recorded, which are the individual drum hits. So for this project, I'm going to do another file, save as, so I have a different version. This is going to be the cut version 1. I'm just going to call it that so I know where I am. So this time I want to delete the drum pattern. So using what we learned in the first part, we're going to use all 3 selection tools simultaneously by clicking on this bracket. Hold the shift key down, hover the mouse on the lower part of each waveform and click it, hit delete to make the drum pattern go away. Next thing I want to do is make some real estate for myself. So I want to get rid of these side panels by clicking these resize icons. And I also want to click that little white pull down so that I don't have to look at the inserts and the sends and the I/O, so that I have as much room here in the edit window as I can get. So the next thing we want to do is do essentially what we did with the drum pattern edit. We want to make sure that we get a single kick, a single snare, and a single hat that are all perfectly aligned to the grid. So we're going to start with just a general basic edit and then dig deeper. So using the shift key, hold the shift key down, click each waveform. While holding the shift key down, click and drag in to where the hits start. You're going to want to zoom in. Let's do the kick first. So I'm going to mute everything but the click track. So I just want to hear the kick. I could hit solo, which is the S button. That would also work. So I didn't record these using the click, I just played them. So we're going to have to align them to the grid, which is going to be easy to do. Let's just take a listen here for a minute. Okay, I'm going to use the second one. So now I want to go into slip mode. And I want to go in there and really zoom in pretty tight on this so that I can get this kick drum sound edited so tight up to the waveform that it will start immediately. That's pretty close. Now, while I'm still zoomed in, I want to move this so that it actually sits right on top of a downbeat. And you can find a downbeat by looking for a 0, 0, 0 in the menu bar. So it doesn't matter at this point whether it's beat 1 or beat 2 or beat 3, but it's easier if it's actually on a beat and not a fraction of a beat. So once you move it in the ballpark, zoom in some more till you can get it really, really right on it. And you'll see that as you zoom in more, you'll find out you haven't actually hit it yet. That's pretty close. I've zoomed all the way in. At some point, you can't zoom in any farther. And when you've got it there, you're done. So then the only other thing we need to do is trim off the tail. I'm going to do the same thing with using the resize tool. So you want just that kick. And it really doesn't matter how long it is, but it might be nice to have it be set to a grid. The tail isn't as important. We just want to make sure we have all of it. You don't want to clip it off short. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to clip it off before the sound dies away. All right. Let's use solo. Actually, I can't use solo because that turns off the mic that I'm talking into, so I have to use mute in this case. So let's look at the snare hits now. So I had four good snare hits. Yeah, let's use the second one. It's a little louder, it's a little fuller. So again, we'll do sort of a rough edit. Then we'll tighten it up. So I'm using my left hand on the keyboard, my right hand on the mouse. Left hand going command bracket left and right to zoom in. Right hand on the mouse to do the editing. So we want to zoom in tight. Get up as close as you can to that snare hit. Zoom in some more. Keep doing it. As you keep zooming in, you'll see that the beginning of the waveform is very easy to pick out, because that trace will stay at the 0 point until the sound hits. And the snare is particularly important to not cut the tail off of. They have a pretty long decay. So the next thing I want to do is get it perfectly lined up to the grid. So I'm going to put it over here with the kick. Zoom in tight. I'm still over here in slip mode still. I haven't gone into grid mode yet. I'm still just getting everything manually lined up to the grid. And then I'll click into grid mode and I'll be there. Okay, zooming in all the way, I see I'm pretty tight. I'm as tight as I'm going to get. So then the only other thing we need to do is the hat. And just for speed at this point, I'm going to just use the right hand overhead, which is where the hat is. I'm going to make this mono at this point, so I'm going to just ignore the left hand overhead. I'm just going to delete it. So let's take a listen at the hat hits and see which is a good one. I like that one better. It's got a little more, it's got a crisper attack. So again, hovering over the lower part of the waveform, doing a rough edit up to the one you want to keep. Zoom in. Command bracket right. Keep tightening it up. Zoom way in. You get zoomed way in like this, you have to use the arrow keys to scroll around, because any move you make in the scroll bar is going to be a gigantic shift. Yeah, and be careful here, because we want to make sure we don't cut off a little of that initial strike. Okay. Let's do the end. Now I'm going to want to make this probably pretty short, because hi-hats happen pretty quick in an edit, in a tune. So I want to put this over here where I was before. me get this dude locked up. Okay, yeah. Now these are going to be pretty tiny. So let's move them all over to the beginning of the tune. So if we do something like a standard rock beat, I want to have eighth notes on the hat. I'm going to want to have quarter notes on the kick and the snare. So setting ourselves up into grid mode over here, you'll start to see we have eighth note grids. What we want to do is build one measure as a template. So let's start by dropping in a kick on beat 1, 1, 3, 0, 0. So that we're going to have a kick, snare, kick, snare, and then we're going to run eighth note hi-hats down the bottom. So if you hold down the Option key while you click and drag, you'll make copies of those waveforms. So we want to have the kick and the snare happening alternately. So I have the kick right now on beat 1 and beat 3, and I'm going to move the snare over. Oops. To beat 2 and 4. So on beat 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, I've got a kick. On beat 1, 2, 0, 0, 0, I got a snare. 1, 3, 0, 0, 0, I got a kick. 1, 4, 0, 0, 0, I got a snare. And because we're in grid mode and we've set the grid to the eighth note, whenever I've moved these things, they've stayed locked to the click. So now we want to make some hats. We want to make eighth note hats, or yeah, maybe 16th note hats. We'll see. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag it over here to beat 1 and, which is the grid between 1, 1 and 1, 2. Now I'm going to Shift, select those two guys, drag both of them over, Shift, select. Now I got 4. Again, holding down the Option key while you click and drag, you're making copies. Let's see what we got. Oh, unmute the tracks. So now I have one measure of just a very basic, simple drum beat. If I switch over to grid mode, set it to the bar, I could use my selection tool, which is the middle tool here, to just drag over the whole lot. So what I do is I sort of hover the mouse at the upper part away from the waveforms. Just click and drag over that whole lot. Because it's set to the grid, I won't be able to select anything smaller than a whole measure. When you set the grid setting to a value here, that constrains your setting, your selections to that setting. So now I can hold down the Option key and click and drag another copy of a measure. But if you remember from the other section we did, if you hold down the Option key and go Option R, you can make several copies all at one shot. So now we have 4 bars of a basic drum beat. It's all locked up to the beat. That's the project. Certainly there's a lot more you can do. You can go in, and what I like to do is Once I have what I consider the foundation, which is the kick, snare, hat, basic square beat, I can go in and start adding more embellishing sounds. I can add more embellishing snare hits. I can change the pattern of the snare, change the pattern of the hi-hat once in a while. Could have made 16th note hi-hats by just doubling it up and setting the grid to 16. Could have changed the kick so that it was a little more funky. All kinds of things, but this is basically the idea for the project. And I'm going to go File, Save As, call this my version 2, Final. That's it. See you next week. Bye.